The concept of the classrooms, I look at it as similar to brick and mortar fashion, brick and mortar. You're going to a store, whether you're buying a computer or you're buying a piece of clothing, that obviously is going away. And what's being replaced is, if the brick and mortar is still going to be around, it's going to be about going into the store and having the experience, and then purchasing the products online and having it shipped to you. It could be via drone, it could be at your doorstep in a couple of hours. I see that in parallel to the education space, and well, quite frankly, I see it across every single sector. Classrooms are not going to exist. Similarly, what's happening in the world of the work ecosystem. Today, people are working in shared office space, they're working remotely, and the concept of the office, the concept of 9 to 5, has certainly evolved and I believe is going away. And I see that with education as well. A teacher being in front of a classroom is going to be seen in 30, 40 years as archaic. I'd be having the conversation with my kids saying, oh, we used to have to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and go to class and sit in the classroom with 30 people and hear an instructor or teacher teach. That is my prediction. That is entirely going to go away in the next 20 to 30 years. No, it's not going to crumble, but the physical building will no longer be here. I think for the experience, it will be here, kind of like the library. Like, when was the last time you actually walked into a library? Last time you do walk into a library, or the next time you do walk into a library, it's somewhat nostalgic. And the experience is still there to be able to take a textbook off the shelf. But as it relates to the actual physical building and going into a classroom, I think we're going to see that as somewhat archaic. The flip side of that, obviously, students will have the flexibility to be online anytime, anywhere, and also being able to be offered a variety of different topics. Right now, obviously, schools are becoming looking at more customized, tailored curriculums. I think we're going to continue to go in that direction. I believe in the next 40 to 50 years, I'm sitting across from you. I may not know whether it's you in a three-dimensional form or it's you in a holographic form.
Oh, now you're talking really...
That's right. We're talking really science fiction, but it's happening. I mean, if you think about it, if I told you, 100 years ago, you'd be able to pick up a device, talk into it, and then speak to somebody across the world, you would think I was crazy. If I told you that we'd be able to get on a plane that looks like a bird and then be in South America within 14 to 15 hours, it was inconceivable. So why not in 2 or 3 decades, I'm sitting across from you not knowing whether or not you're a human or whether you're a holographic or you're an avatar. And I certainly see that could be, fortunately or unfortunately, replacing that human contact. Message is, I believe everything is technology-centric today. But at the same time, the basics of whether it's accounting, whether it's finance, whether it's management skills, has to be the core of whatever you do, because that's the knowledge. And ideally layering technology on top of that, or at the very least integrating the two, is going to be ultimately the most powerful formula. To some degree, parental standards need to be created, and that really starts in the home. That can't be taught with their friends or their peers because they're all on their mobile phone. So it starts in the home, and I think that's important. Otherwise, you see at the breakfast, at the lunch, at the dinner table, how many students, how many forget the younger generation, how many adults actually are not making that eye contact and not being mindful that, hey, your children are around the table, why are you looking down? Why are you sharing something on Facebook? And we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it as well. And I talk to my wife about it all the time, trying to create, hey, this is dinner, this is lunchtime, we're spending time with our children, put the phone away. There's no emergency there. And unfortunately, I'm guilty of the same thing, and I think a lot of parents are guilty of the same thing. And I really think it's about being mindful and being conscious as well. And I think that I speak publicly about, of course, I love technology and very tech-centric, but at the same time being mindful as well, being mindful about your surroundings. And if we can converge the two of mindfulness and technology, I think that's a killer combination. I think overall, faculty is doing, to make a blanket statement, I think faculty is doing very, very well. And I speak at various universities. What you have on the faculty side, typically people go into education, teachers go into education because they're passionate about it, because they like the younger generation, they believe in the future of our children. So the passion is there. The question is whether or not they can keep up with technology and understand the needs of the younger generation. I think that's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to continue to be a challenge. And keeping up with the different social media applications, because whether you like it or not, the generation that we're living in right now, we're spending 4 or 5 hours on social media. And I see that as a double-edged sword as well. I don't necessarily see that as being healthy, but at the same time, that's where our students are learning from, right? They're getting our news from Facebook, they're getting our information from Twitter. So the question is how to create those boundaries, but also figuring out how teachers could be able to integrate in whatever they're teaching to the students to be able to kind of create a formula where it's a win-win. And quite frankly, I think that's challenging. I do think that we are living in one world and collaborating with the Chinese, with the Indians, with people from South America, Central America. I think it's more critical now because we're all living in a connected world. And I don't believe in competition. Within competition, it's kind of a race to the bottom and it becomes cutthroat. The question is, can our generation and the generations younger than us, can we create an atmosphere and an ecosystem where everything we do is about collaborating and not about competing? And I think we're going to be seeing and talking a lot about that in the future.
So that's also something that we have a value that we have to teach our students.
Correct. I don't believe necessarily in test taking. I don't believe in contests. I think that is, we're going to look at that in 100 years. We're going to say, hey, that was kind of archaic. Why didn't they collaborate? Why didn't, the group focus on each person's core strengths and let them double down on that? And have them help each other as a group. And I think that is critical. And I think it's important that teachers start looking at that as well. I still believe writing skills are one of the most important things, because people, if you see what's happening, people are sending messages and they can't even write properly. They send across text LOL and emojis, and that's being replaced with grammar, with spelling, with sentence structure, with paragraphs. I think writing skills, unfortunately, are going away. And I don't believe that they should be. I think we need to figure out how to bring that back. I think very few students can write a cohesive paragraph or put together a creative writing piece that's really impactful. And I think that needs to be one of the cores of education. I said, because it's if you can't communicate, sure, you may be able to have a very, very high emotional quotation, a very high EQ, but also it's important to have the ability to be able to take your thoughts and to be able to transmit it on paper, in a paragraph, in a paper. And I think people are moving away from that. And I think that teachers as well need to come back to that. Speech is critical, and one of the most basic things in speech is making eye contact. It's amazing. I was overseas speaking to a relatively large group of students, and I told each student to turn to the person to the right or to the left of them, and I said, stare at each other for 60 seconds. 60 seconds, and I was shocked I was absolutely shocked about the reaction. First of all, there was 400 or 500 people in the crowd. There wasn't one couple, there wasn't one pair that was able to maintain eye contact for 60 seconds. They were getting very fidgety, they were uncomfortable, it was very foreign to them. Some were crying. And I called them up to stage. I said, why were you crying? And they said it was the first time in my life that I was able to stop, to be mindful, and to be able to connect with somebody. And it was one of the most amazing experiments I've ever done on stage, and it was impactful. And I said, well, keep trying. I said, go back to your seat and try. And I can't tell you how many students were just blocked. They weren't able to make eye contact for 60 seconds. And that to me was a shock. It really was, and it was a turning point. And I was saying to myself, hey, we're too connected to our devices. We're looking down, we're not making eye contact. And going back to what you said, oral presentation skills, it's not so much about delivering the speech. I think people can practice that. I think the hardest part is making the eye contact, which you would think is one of the most simplest things to do.
And kind of listening while you speak.
Right. And who's...
Listen with your eyes.
Exactly. And just eye contact, very basic things like looking at into someone's eyes. It's kind of it's a window into their soul, but it's also a mirror back and looking at yourself. And people can't do it. And that, to me, I find to be amazing. And unfortunately, it's only going to get worse unless the parents in the home and the teachers kind of bring back those human skills and bring things full circle.
And we might need to brick and mortar classroom.
You're right. We may. That's a good point. We may see that pendulum swing happen, and I think there's a big question mark that may be on the horizon as well. And I think that actually would be a good thing. I think critical thinking is going to be very, very important. I know that the Chinese right now, for the first time, they're actually starting to ask questions. I mean, they've been under communist rule for some time, so the challenge for them to be able to debate, to be able to have open conversations, it's starting to happen, and I find that to be absolutely phenomenal. Here in the U.S., it's just the opposite. We're almost too opinionated. Like we don't, like what you said, Professor. We don't listen as much. So I think that we're seeing two polar opposite existence, and it's interesting to observe both the students coming out of China and the students coming out of America. So I just love observing both ecosystems. I think the convergence is also important, something that we came back to in terms of collaboration versus competition, and seeing a bigger, more infused melting pot where everyone could learn from each other. In terms of artificial intelligence, artificial intelligence needs to be seen as an aid to be able to free up some of the mundane tasks that we do on a daily basis. And if you look at the silver lining, or you look at the positive side of it, it could be that it frees up our time. Instead of going grocery shopping, we're focusing on more productive things. The industry, or at least the court of public opinion, is that there's going to be cyborgs on the street, killing each other, or at least a battle of the robots. That's never going to happen, because there's still logic and there's still human creativity that I don't believe robots or artificial intelligence or deep learning will ever be replicated.